Good evening. My name is Magdiel Job A. Corpuz. This is a managing organizational change presentation entitled Analysis: What Could Have Been Done to Save Kodak. It's an analysis on disruptions that dislodged the once dominant company. In 3, 2, 1, lights, camera, action. The overview of the presentation will be on four aspects. First, the history and description of Kodak's products. Secondly, the explanation of Kodak's rise to the top and competitive disruptors. Thirdly, the emergence of the disruption and their tactics. Lastly, why Kodak lost the position and its competitors today. The Kodak founder, George Eastman, once quoted a famous company tagline: "You press the button and we do the rest." Kodak did indeed invest in digital imaging and did in buy Opto, but instead of turning into a vibrant social network, Kodak focused on getting more people to print more pictures. Kodak was founded in the 1880s by innovator George Eastman, an industry giant in the 1970s. It filed for bankruptcy in 2012. In the early 1960s, Kodak sales surpassed $1 billion for the first time in its history. By 1975, Steve Stason, an engineer at Kodak, invented a digital camera. Its executives weren't too enthusiastic. But due to direct competition in the mid-1980s, there was a shift in the market where consumers were started to flee the company for competitors such as Fujifilm due to its low-cost color films. In 2012, Eastman Kodak Company filed for bankruptcy in the state of New York. The company's core products were on film and printing photos, but not the camera. Kodak's Kodachrome was the company's leading sales item. It was discontinued in 2006 after 74 years in production. Kodak became so dominant in the photographic industry that by 1976, 85% of all film cameras and 90% of all film sold in the US was Kodak. The company had a new tagline. It was Kodak Moments. In 2015, Kodak reported that it had hundreds of millions of followers across its social media platforms. The company wanted to make connections to its loyal fan base. But what happened? Kodak's list of competitors now include Canon, Fujifilm, Samsung, and Nikon. Today, revenue is less than $2 billion and it has less than 5,000 employees worldwide. During the 1980s, photography businesses began to shift to digital. Kodak was a late entrant to the digital innovation. It was still selling analog cameras and film. Maybe it was their business model to make pictures available to everyone, even though customers wanted something else. From 1991 to 2011, Kodak kept making lackluster products that did not excite its customer base. The declining trend continued where sales were not as good worldwide. Kodak reached an early lead in the market and had a 27% market share by 1999. But that slipped to 15% by 2003 and 7% by 2010 as Kodak ceded ground to Canon, Nikon, and others. Analysts said, sure, they made some mistakes and today we are just a shell of their former selves. But they had a good run. They revolutionized an industry and led that industry for 100 years. They did some great things for photography. Maybe it was just their time to go. The dominance and the downward trend. Kodak lost trust in a crowded marketplace. Film was their bread and butter, but change was not fully embraced by the company. By year 2000, just before the digital transition, sales related to film accounted for 72% of Kodak revenue and 66% of its operating income, against 60 and 66% for one of its main competitors, Fujifilm. Kodak was never able to fundamentally shift its business model, and as the silver halide film began its inevitable decline, so did the company. The Achilles heel for Kodak was its prized digitized cameras. It was revealed that by According to a Harvard case study, it lost $60 for every digital camera it sold in 2001, whereas in 2000, Kodak made an operating income of 1.4 billion out of 10.2 billion sales in photography division. The profits began to decline. The decline of Kodak was fully alluded to the ignorance of its executive leadership. For example, CEO George Fisher knew that digital photography might eventually invade or even replace Kodak's core businesses. Doubtless, he and other senior executives were tempted to ignore it. In HBR's 10 must reads for change management, the most general lesson to be learned from the more successful cases is that change process goes through a series of phases that in total usually require a considerable length of time. Skipping steps creates only the illusion of speed and never produces a satisfying result. In addition, competitors such as Fujifilm have expanded to healthcare and motion picture products. Kodak was mainly interested in getting its customers to print more photos. Digital cameras were becoming obsolete. Why? Smartphones took the world by storm, and digital cameras, whereas producers saw their sales quickly spiraling down. People went from printing pictures to storing them on digital devices or sharing them online on social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Kodak had delayed a response to the shift in consumers' appetite for smartphones. Facebook has Instagram, but did you know that Kodak once had Photo? Photo is a photo sharing platform it had acquired in the year 2001. It did not materialize the potential of the acquisition. Instead, Kodak used Photo to get its consumers to start printing more photos. Here's a breakdown of Kodak's decline. It did not invest in itself. It had a lack of strategy in the shift from switching from analog to digital, and from digital to social networking was overlooked. Kodak would have benefited from a diversified revenue source with social networking because social networking is a source for advertisement revenue. Kodak was complacent. Competitors such as Fujifilm were giving consumers cheaper and advanced technological products. Strategic problems were tackled through rigid means, and as mistakes in the manufacturing process were costly and profitability was high, Kodak avoided risky decisions and instead developed procedures and policies to maintain the status quo. Why? A fierce competitor of the Kodak is the Japanese firm Fujifilm. To make matters worse, Kodak withdrew early on developing manufacturing its own digital cameras to rely on OEM manufacturers instead. Not having its own technology such as sensor and image processing, Kodak put itself in a disadvantage. In reality, Kodak failed for the same reason that Fujifilm succeeded: diversification. For Kodak, it was the lack of diversification that condemned its firm. Change is difficult in a top organization, a once dominant organization like Kodak. There's an adage: don't fix something that's not broken. I think they might have taken it too far. Kodak did not act strategically. Despite forecasts of photography businesses was shifting to more digital, other technological competitors took the company. Unfortunately, they built themselves in a traditional market and also failed to find a new market. Competitors such as Canon and Sony did a better job. Explained in a Harvard Business Review article in 2002. Kodak today is in its shadows of competitors. The competitors position itself against the once dominant, formidable Kodak. Fujifilm has opened factories in the US and dared to challenge Kodak's dominance. Today, Fujitech controls 70% of this market worldwide. Facebook and Instagram have hundreds of millions of active followers. It was a missed opportunity for Kodak. That's a 1 year after a Kodak engineer invented the first digital camera. They did not take it seriously. Kodak is no longer relevant for consumers, and in the 1990s they had kiosks, but it did not generate revenue. The future remains uncertain for Kodak. The photography business will continue to evolve with or without Kodak. This is the bibliography references. Thank you for listening to this presentation.